Hello there, good morning and welcome to my little, well, not so little arty corner here on YouTube. It's lovely that people are still joining in here. So if you're a new subscriber, thank you for joining. And I appreciate you clicking that button totally so much. And if you like what you see here and you haven't subscribed yet, or it's your first time visiting and you like, please consider clicking the subscribe button. It's completely free to do. It doesn't cost you anything except for that tiny bit of energy to move your finger or your mouse and click on that button, the subscribe button. And I'll be eternally grateful to you. And eternal gratitude is I do for people I appreciate. And thank you also for comments. There's been some lovely ones yet again. And if you've liked and shared or given shout outs to my channel on your own social media, thank you so much. I appreciate that very much as well, because it does help to get the word out. Something a little bit different maybe today, because like everything, I have an idea, but I'm not quite sure exactly where it's going to go. Yes, I've been watching on YouTube from time to time, not watching all the way through, but I've seen bits and bobs here where people are doing what's called slow stitching. And it's been rattling around my head for a while, like things often do. And I go, right, okay, let's find out more about it. So I bought a couple of books yesterday for my Kindle. And it's basically stitching in quite a free-form, slow way, a deliberate way to create patterns and textures and so on. And of course, I'm going to do it my own way, you know, because that's what art's about. The books give me that idea or the inspiration and sometimes that permission to do these things, because, you know, it's like with drawing, isn't it? It's getting over these things that we've been told, oh, you shouldn't do that, or that's not how you do this. And then eventually you find out, well, actually other people are doing this, so why was I told I can't do it? Oh, in that case, that's what I'm going to do. It's about giving permission, about being able to try things out. And when it comes to drawing and things like that, I'm not so bad at doing that, though I do know my own limitations to a degree. But I don't mind trying to push myself outside those and see where it goes. Sometimes it goes nowhere. Sometimes it gets me terribly frustrated and despondent about myself. And sometimes I go, oh, why didn't I try this a long time ago? This works nicely, doesn't it? Things like that. So this is my... I did do some slow stitching on felt last night because I happen to have some felt. But this morning I thought, hang on, paper. Let's do some papery stuff. So I spent some time colouring papers with distress inks. I've got far more than you can see under here. And one of the pieces I tore this section out of. The book paper that's here, it came out of a, what was it, commercial maths book, a really old one. And as far as I'm concerned, this is the best thing to do with maths books, is to use them in art. Because maths, I can do maths, I can do what I need to do for what I'm interested in. Statistics was always a draw to me because it's about the only maths, apart from adding up and keeping balance and using in science. When it got more esoteric, like calculus and things like that, brain goes. But as far as I'm concerned, it's the best thing to do. So I started by stitching this down. I'm just using embroidery threads here from my stash. And I chose colours that sort of tied in with the colours in the background, sort of. I say sort of. The brown is a bit deeper than the brown spots here, but I'm happy with that because I wanted some colours that would stand out like the greyish blue here is as well. But I also added some of this very pale minty green. And I do intend to add some beads to this because I have got a stack of beads in my stash from the days I used to do a lot of textile art, which I've gone away from, but this may have me circling back. And funny thing, while I was doing this, or, you know, the other stuff last night, because I was too tired to do anything else. I was exhausted yesterday. I'm not much better today. But I was sewing, I was thinking, this reminds me of Friday afternoons in primary school, you know, when I was 8, 9, 10 years old, and it would be a craft afternoon. And everybody in the class, male and female, we had a box And I can still see it was a cardboard box made out of thick, heavy cardboard. And in there we kept our sewing project. And this was using that big, chunky Aida cloth and embroidery thread for all 6 strands. And you just created on a panel on this Aida the different kinds of stitches that you could make with it. So it wasn't cross stitch, just cross stitch. It was other embroidery stitches. And then we turned that into like a pouch or a pencil case, a big purse, I suppose, or place to keep money. We call purses in the UK. We keep money in our purses. So I think they're called wallets elsewhere. But women have purses, men have wallets in the UK. And a handbag is what Americans call purses. That's what we carry our purses in, our handbags. And I can remember doing this, and I can remember creating this, and I had that thing I made. You had to stitch the lining in, and I can still see that the Aida cloth was navy blue and the inside was a bright red, and there was all this lovely coloured stitching and patterns on the front. And I had it for years. It got ink stained, and I don't know what's happened to it. I don't know what happened to it. It vanished, is all I can say. I don't think I would have disposed of it because it's something that I valued. So it's one of those strange things that happens. And of course, then that took me to memories, when I was in university, I'd forever getting acid holes in jeans. And instead of throwing the jeans away, I'd get some embroidery threads and I'd stitch around them and create flowers and leaves and have all of these garlands flowing where there were acid holes to make a feature of them, because that's what I did. And, all other things. I dabbled with cross stitch, though I find cross stitch frustrating these days. I prefer to create things myself than follow what somebody else has created to do. But who knows what's going to happen in the future, eh? And, all the textile art I did and so on. This is story time before I get into anything. So my thinking about this is, even though I haven't finished it, I want to find a piece of paper that it will look nice on, and I'm wavering between these 3. So I'm basically auditioning this to see where. See, I quite like it on this pinky one. This is quite nice. The dots on all of these are exactly the same colour. I use tea dye distress ink, and all the papers I made this morning have the same pattern with tea dye on top of the background colours. And there's often, tea dye in the background or other colours that are there. So I quite like that one, but I'm not sure. I have this one which has a little hint of green in it, and I do quite like that. Although there's green in this, but it's more of a bluey green, and this background here is more of a yellowy green. So that's possible. I've got this one. I do like this one. Actually, I do like this, because although the colours are quite similar, because I'm sure, but that's green and this is a more grey blue, they actually look quite nicely harmonious together. And the green here is a bit bluer than the minty green I've got here, but it's not dissimilar. This one, I think this is 2 threads of the embroidery floss. This was 3, because well, why not? Actually looks more like this, and I think I like that. The last one I dug out, this one is, I'm tending towards this one as my favourite, was this one, which is, I think it's old paper, or is it old aged linen, and might be rusty hinge or tea dye, I can't remember. But I thought that one would be quite nice because the brownie colours are complementary to the bluey colours here. But no, I like this one. Even though they're very similar, I think that makes them look really nice together. Now, my only problem now is to decide, where do I put this and how do I put it here? This section down here, I want to leave for some handwriting. I want to leave that for handwriting. And I could actually fix this to the paper, because there's no reason I can't add beads through both thicknesses of paper. It'd be a lot easier to do it otherwise. But I want to lift this up, so I want to be using some what do you call it, foam tape, really, to lift it up. And I do want to ink around the edges. So give me a moment, I'll be back. I'm just going to get my distress inks. Be back in a moment. There we are, back. That was quick and easy. It's because I know where everything is. Ish. Depends. But I did want to ink around the edge here, and I think I'm going to use, I think I'll use the tea dye because it will tie in with the dots and everything. It just gives that edge to this that I quite like. And because I tore this, I've got these nice raggedy edges and fluffy edges that have their own little bit of charm, and they'll absorb the ink differently, perhaps. No perhaps about it. So I'm just using a piece of cut and dry foam here, and I'm just putting it along the edge just to add some colour here. If bits bend over and if it gets a bit frayed, I'm fine with that. The more distressed it looks, I think the better it's going to appear here, possibly. So that helps to separate it a bit from the background. But what I do want to do, I think, is I do want a little bit of darker ink here in little places. So I'm looking for, there's my walnut stain, and I'll use this just here and there just to give some darker bits so it looks a bit grubbier, a bit grungier on the edges in places. Not all the way around, just here and there, just to add that feeling of grunge, I suppose. So that's okay, that works, that does it for me. Oh, you might notice as well, I have added some patterns here. So you can see I've got lines and dots here and here, and I've got lines in between the stitching here. Very pale, the pale blue Jelly Roll Moonlight pen. And I used a sort of terracotta-y kind of colour here. Again, lines and dots mimicking this. But I put some Shatek in there, the curved version. Some blue dots there, some brown dots there. So I'm not just doing stitching, I'm using other things. I guess this is described as mixed media now, isn't it? I think it might be. I've got some tape because I've decided, well, perhaps this time I won't add beads. I wasn't doing a very good job of it anyway. But this is foam tape, which will both help to secure the stitching, because my ability to secure stitching is not exactly the best. But I can pop this around the edge, and what it'll do is it'll lift it up. Oh God, let's try and do that before I stick it down. Lift it up, readjust, and it'll just lift it up. Oh good, that goes right up to the edge. I didn't want it that far up. And then let's have some right down the middle, like so. Foam tape's great. Oh gosh, it's a bit long, so I'll just trim that up, and then perhaps I'll take half of this, pop it there so the bottom is supported, and this little bit over here needs a little bit of support as well, I think. Now this is the fun bit. So I need to decide where I'm going to put this and how I'm going to put it on here. That doesn't feel right. That doesn't feel right. That doesn't feel right. That does. What about that? No, it's going to have to go here, I think. And then over here I can do some drawing, which is the whole aim of today. Now you've had ages of me telling stories. Oh, and this tape is going to be a swine, I think. And I haven't got any nails because I trimmed them. Oh no, I'm doing all right here. Super sticky stuff, but it just adds that little height to this particular thing. This abstract, mixed media, slow stitched, pen drawn on, distress inked. Yeah, I've gone and got my thumb stuck to one. What was I saying? Oh, I don't know. It lifts it up so that the I've got all of those. There's this one little bit here. Oh, and another little bit I've just seen. So that the stitches doesn't make it all lumpy and bumpy and so on. And you know, I might have been better off sort of like drawing around this and using that as a guide, but you know, we'll see what happens. So I have looked for a Tangle pattern that I can use, because for the background I really do want to use a subtle pattern, so I'm not going to be drawing. This will be a shocker. Right, let me just bring that out. I think that will look okay there. There's enough space around it that we've got an edge, a border there. And there we go, there's that. So let me just get some stuff out the way. Oh, good, that all went in the bin, not on the floor. Always good when things end up in the bin when they're meant to go there. So that's okay, I like that. Now then, I want to draw a pattern on the background here, but I want to use a pen that will show up subtly, so I'm not going to use black. But I have choices. I've got these moonlight pens, and I'm tempted with those because I don't really have any pale enough colours that I'd like to use in the background in the Sarasa vintage colours. I have got a grey, but I think it's going to be too dark of a grey. I'm looking around for a piece of paper. Oh, there we go. You know, so that would be too dark in the background. I might as well go full black. I've got a bluey grey here, but I think that will be, although it's lighter, it's still a bit on the dark side. We don't do the dark side here. Star Wars reference. Light side of the Force always. But I do have this lovely pale blue, which I've used here. That may work, but I do have this grey, and that could be really pretty against that, because there are hints of grey there. The other colours I could use are, I've got a pale purple, but there's nothing here that's purple. This orangey colour, I could use the terracotta, but it's a bit dark. I want something that's a bit more subtle, because I want this to be the star of the show, really, if you can call it that, and the background just to be there as supporting. And so I'm going to handwrite something in there, I think. I think I'll go with the grey, because I've got this greyish blue there, and that would be quite nice, but I don't have that in the jelly rolls. This blue is quite pale. I do have a similar colour to this actually in the zigs. Let's have a look. I think it'll be too dark though, my zig writers. Excuse the rattle. Yeah, this is the zig writer, and I think it will end, I think it will be, it's a little bit lighter than these, but it's still darker than I want. I think the grey, oops, so I throw pens around because that's what we do. I think the grey will be nice and subtle, so I think that's what I'm going to go with. I'm just looking to see if there's any other colours. I've got a pale blue here. How pale blue is this? It's a powder blue. Too pale. I'm just looking. I've got a grey here as well. Now that one is similar to the moonlight. The advantage of these is they are permanent, but as I'm not planning on doing anything much. Actually, I will use that rather than this, because if I want to add shadows or anything like that, that'd be nice. Oh, hang on. I've got this as a green. Oh, wrong end. We don't want a big fat end. Let's have a look. Ooh, now. I think that'll be quite nice. I can add some pattern on there with that. Yep, got it. Well, well, well. Though I don't think the zigs have, I didn't think the zigs had anything much in the way of sort of like vintagey, soft muted colours. But this one's called Sagebrush. So I'm quite happy with that. That will look nice. And as I've said, I can add some sagebrush on here. And I think what I'll do is I'll add some dots as if they are coming off the tips of this brushy bit here. And perhaps some at the bottom, like so, and some here. Perhaps a couple at the top, and then there. And then I may do the writing in this there when I decide what I'm going to write there. Because whatever I do, I don't want the writing or anything else in my face. I want it subtle again, because I quite like this. It's completely random, just really simple stitches as I get used to sewing again, and sewing through paper, which is a bit challenging, it has to be said, but they'd be quite nice. So yeah, right, so the pattern I've chosen is a really old one, and I found it on tanglepatterns.com. It's one I'm familiar with, but not one I've used very often. And it's called 2N5, 2 and 5, and it's by Anita Roby Lavery, a CZT, and it was uploaded to tanglepatterns.com on the 18th of July 2011. So that's what, 11 years ago, nearly? Amazing, isn't it? So but what it's going to do, it's going to mimic, I'm picking up the idea of straight lines and the dots I've used here. And to do this, it is a grid of 2, 3, 4, 5 lines, and then 2 dots like this. So 5 lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and perhaps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 underneath. Perhaps I should do the 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if I do these, then I got 6 there, so it is a question of trying to keep them. But they want them almost to touch and join, but not quite, because we want some separation there. And then in between I can pop these circles. Now the original pattern has got these dots inside, but you know what? I think I'm just going to fill them in, because that's what I've done on my piece of mixed media slow stitching. You could draw a grid if you like, but if this goes wonky, which it's likely to, because I'm drawing it, then it just mimics the wonkiness of this. In fact, I didn't realise how slanted all of that was until I mounted it on here. And I'm not worried about that. It's what it is. And so if things are a bit wobbly and wonky here, I'm fine with that as well. I could draw a grid in with pencils if I wanted to, but why make life easy? So I'm going great guns here to get these done. And I think I'll do them 2 rows at a time like this, and then go back and do all of the dots in between. Goodness knows how I could shadow this in. Shade here. No idea. I'll work it though, because we do, don't we? We work out how to do things, and whatever I do though, I want it to be very subtle, because as I've said, I don't want to take away anything from here. In fact, as I'm doing this, I'm thinking, I think I might have chosen a pen that's too darker than what I wanted. If that's the case, then well, that's what's happened, and It is what it is, but there are always things I can do. So I could always use some white gesso to knock it back and so on. This is quite a nice, it's a Tangle pattern I've known about for a long time, but I've never really made use of it in anything that I can think of. Oh, there's 6 there. Well, if we're having 2 and 6, we're having 2 and 6 here today. I said it is what it is today, and nobody's going to go and count every single one of these little squares made up of lines to see whether you've only got 5 lines in them. Well, that's my theory on it anyway. And I think on the edges here, I think I'm just going to take these lines right the way up to the edge of this. So it looks like there's just lines coming out underneath it rather than try and work out where circles go. Because I just think that'll work fine anyway. Isn't it funny how my wobbly random stitching is influencing me in, or giving me permission, as I was talking about that earlier, to be a bit wobbly and wonky with my lines and my patterns here and not so precise as I would normally be. I mean, my lines are still fairly straight, but said I wanted to try to mimic. I'm getting more like 2 and 6, 2 and 6s here all the time now. But it is what it is, and as I've said, there's no great shakes if it doesn't work out exactly the way you want it to be. You know, part of me is wishing I'd sealed the distress ink with clear gesso, because I'd been able to add some white or some white gesso or another wash over this pen just to dull it down that little bit. Whereas if I use it now with distress ink, it will move the distress inks. Distress inks always react with water, apart from some of the pigment parts of the oxides, but the traditional distress inks will always react with water. In the original deconstruction that's on tanglepatterns.com, Anita Roby Lavery does use like a pencil grid to keep all of this even, and these lines here, they do meet, but I want to keep them a little bit of a gap between them, and as I've said already, I didn't want anything here today that is just too precise. I'm having a day away mostly from the computer. I had a really intense time yesterday finishing a piece of art for Earth Day later this month, and it was digital art, so it really was intense for me. And I just feel the need today to have that bit of a break, which is where the slow stitching is a good thing. It's a good thing I decided to go with it because it's something a bit new and different. I also get to start a new lettering sketchbook today because my other one was full. So time to start a new one. And whether I continue in the one I've picked up to use, because it's a square format. It's quite big squares as well. I think it might be 10 inches square. Again, it's one of the sea white mixed media ones that I like. or all media paper rather. Look at that, my edges are creeping closer to the edge here. We're going all wonky here. But as I've said, it's going to be what it's going to be, and I'm going to be fine with that. Because the worst thing that happens is I just have to decide I don't like it and peel this off or cut it off and mount it on another piece of paper and do something similar. Because I know this will irk me very soon, because I'll go, why didn't I put a pencil grid in there? But I am going to try to bring this back in here so that I don't have and we can do that with this one. I will pop that one there. Oh, that's how to do that. Put the two in where they go underneath, you know, this side of the gap, this side of the gap, and then fill in between with 3 lines. One in the middle and one either side. I'm amazed it took me that long to work that out. Look at that. And then here, I think I'm just going to have to make my piece. I'll tell you what. Why don't I do the same kind of thing that I did over here and just have lines running off to the edge of the paper, not necessarily lining up with each other either, but and on either side of the dots as well, because that would make sense then, wouldn't it? But it adds some texture to that edge of the paper, and it will. There, that makes a bit of sense, doesn't it? Wibbly wonky. There we are. So I was thinking this must be a bit like watching paint dry as I do this. I could have done my story time while I was doing this, but I didn't. But I suppose I'm giving you an insight into how my grasshoppery, as my niece calls it, my sparkly brain works, because I do tend to sparkle off in all kinds of directions. But I think that would be okay to do that one with. Just checking this side. And I'm glad I worked that one out, and you know what's going to happen now, don't you? Lines down this side. Okay, so I am going to pop my 2 dots in here, and then oh, perhaps not. Oh, Angela, I get myself in a pickle, don't I? There. Let's go along and do that. And leave the gaps for the dots. There we are. That's a better way of doing it. And it makes it easier to keep to 5 lines as well. So I'll have 2 dots here, and then I'll finish off with the rest of the lines. That makes some sense, doesn't it? So here I want 5 lines here. Let's just extend that a little bit. So I'd want 5 lines going this way as well. This side we can have as many as we need. Yeah, so dots there. It's guessing where the dots go. I am making a pickle of it. But I'm hoping that at the end my confusion will make some kind of sense, you know. So I'm putting the lines under the dots. Oh, look at that, I've got wobbly dots there. And here they'll go right to the edge. And I can go back and put the dots in. Talk about monotangling. Okay. So here's where my dots would be here. So, all right, so if I do this one, then I can do that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 there. And I can put the dots there. That works. I'm getting there. I only want to go this far down, so yeah, so yesterday was one of those days where everything was intense, and by the time I'd finished, I was absolutely mentally drained because I'd worked for about 5-6 hours, constantly to get this poster, done and dusted and off. So it's for a competition of some kind, and my eyes have gone funny and all sorts. Well, my glasses, but working digitally does take a lot more concentration than working with traditional media in some way. There's no way that I could have a conversation like this whilst working digitally. And I had a new update of software I mostly use these days, which is Clip Studio Paint. Oh my gosh, they've got a palette app, a mixing palette function on it now. Oh, I'm just so happy to have that in a way, because it will let me see how colours mix together before I try them out, and you can pick colours up from the mixing palette. And genius idea. I don't know if other apps have it, but just so nice. So I've got new things to play with there when I've got a bit of time to play around. So there we go. Here we are. We're getting there now with this. Last line. Now I'm beginning to lose the plot here after this lot as well. But I'll be able to, once I finish, take a step back and have a look at this and go, okay then, that worked. Perhaps I could have done with, paler ink here. Pale grey would have worked, I think, nicely. It would have been much more subtle as well. But there we are. But I think that ties in with, I think this pattern ties in nicely with the dots and the lines over here, which is why I chose it. Now on this side, I'm going to try to do just lines going to the edge. I'm not going to try. So let me have a look. So I want to get to about here. Am I going to try and get the same number of lines? So I've got the first two done, so let's have a look. Does it matter too much whether I do or not? It's about texture rather than, because I am just using rows of straight lines on this side. I'm not going to try to put the dots in. And because I've got this section in between, anything could happen behind it, couldn't it? Because I've lost all the dots. They've been processed by my strange slow stitched piece here. I suppose what I'm doing here is akin to the Tangle idea of cartouches that they did a couple of years ago, which you can find on their YouTube channel, of creating Zentangle patterns that frame a photograph or an object. Well, I've got an object. I'm definitely going to find a quote to put in here about either slow stitching or imperfect art, and I know I'm rushing a little bit here, and the idea of slow stitching or doing anything slowly is to slow us down. But there we go. That's my thing for the day, my wibbly wobbly art. Now then, I think what I'm going to do is I have got this white charcoal, and you see, I haven't got anything I can try it on other than on here. So if I put it on here and use that over that, does it actually... I think it will, sort of. So what's the worst that's going to happen? See, I like this as it is, but I think some highlight could help. So I think I'm going to put some highlights right down the middle of each of these sections. And as I've said, I can't do this with anything else because of the distress ink. If I'd sealed this with gesso and sealed this again with gesso, I could have done it that way. But let's have a look at how this chalk pastel will work. Ooh, sorry for the squeak. I know some people don't like that kind of sound. I'm not a fan of it myself. I was so glad when the old-fashioned chalkboards went out of use. Didn't have to have squeaky chalk anymore. As a teacher, we went to whiteboards which had their own squeaks, or dry whiteboards. And then, of course, it went to all computer screens, or, computer projection, which was fab. To a degree. It wasn't so easy to write on them, mind. It's a bit of a pain. So use them in tandem. But how teaching changed while I was in that environment. Okay, so I'm just going to use a paper stump to blend this out and rub it in so that it won't spread too far. But this is toning this back without losing too much, and without losing too much of the background colour as well, which is really good. And because I'm not too worried if it spreads too far. Now I've seen that. It's a subtle difference, but there is a difference. So I'm going to go here. Like so. So that looks okay. Now then, I'm thinking about whether I can put something in the centre of these. I'm just rubbing in where it still hasn't quite rubbed in. I think that may have knocked it back just a little bit. I think you can see the difference just very subtly in the centre of them. Hopefully. I'm looking at the screen. Perhaps not so much there, perhaps. I don't know. Perhaps if I can get something that's very, very faint. a light colour there. So I'm picking up my chalk pastels and I'm looking for one that's either a pale grey. I'm not sure the pale grey would show up, but let's, oh yes it will. So let's go for pale grey in between these. Again, I'm just going to come and rub these in and smooth it out gently, just to make it a more subtle difference there. Possibly too subtle, but we'll go with it and see how it looks. Because I just think it's just getting this idea of up and down. Sort of rows like a ploughed field. The furrows. That's the word I was looking for. And let's see if that will miss there a bit, but it'll be fine. As we're spreading it a bit wider than perhaps I would ordinarily. Let me just move it, blow the chalk away, and we'll do the same over on this side. Just going to get the grey chalk in between these furrows and see if we can rub it into the paper, just to get that shadowiness going in between the rows then. See, I could have just done rows of lines like this, I think, right the way across without the dots, but you know, until you do things you don't really know sometimes, and it's that simplicity, isn't it? So this shows up better, I think, on this side than the other, the grey, but it's definitely there, at the top especially. I can see it at the bottom. So as I said, it's quite subtle, but it is noticeable. And I'm quite happy. I think so. As I said, it's something a bit different, but there is some Tangle patterns in there. And you've got some of my thought process as to what I do when things either don't seem to be working or, you know, they work out in a strange way. The other thing I've got as well is I have the possibility of adding stitching to these lines as well. And part of me is going, oh, I could add beads to the dots, Angela. And I'm going, no, Angela, no, you're not. No, you're not. No, anywhere that gets beads added is going to be this one. But I do have that option here, which could be fun to put, you know, a darkish stitched line down there, which is possible because this is just one piece of paper thick here. I'd have to go through paper and foam tape, sticky foam tape at that, so it's not going to happen. So I hope you've enjoyed that. Hope you found it useful, and that I won't have put you off from my channel, because it is something a bit different, but it's also something that's a bit creative and something that might appeal to some of you to give this a go. There's lots of ways of creating marks on paper, of creating patterns. I'm just using basic stitches, sort of like it's just a running stitch, and then I'm just using back stitch, nothing complicated. No French knots, although I did successfully do French knots last night for the first time in my life. And, you know, other things like the fly stitch and so on. I've got to learn these and see how they'd work in. But part of my mind's thinking as well is I like to draw in lines. That's what we do in Zen Tangle, is we draw lines. So is there any way I can use stitching to replicate these things? And the answer is yes, of course there is. It's just I've got to get that confidence in stitching and decide whether I want... Well, I actually really enjoy working on paper, which means it's going to be really easy to draw what I want to stitch in, perhaps. But we'll see. So the only thing this needs, if I do any slow stitching, I will show you. And when I've decided on the quote I'm going to put there, I'll show that. I'm going to do it in handwriting, I think. Well, I most probably will hand letter it. The difference between hand lettering and hand drawing is hand lettering is you are drawing letter shapes. You're deliberately focusing on the shapes of the letters you want to create. Whereas handwriting is what you do, it's what you've learned, it's how you express your writing, it's how you write very fluidly. So if you think about, like a Tangle pattern here, it's like one stroke at a time, isn't it? That's hand lettering. And typography, you have typography, and typography is really the art of how you arrange letters and so on together, I think, and sort of like developing styles of fonts and the like. And it's you can do hand drawn typography, which is similar. It's like hand lettering. It's just about arrangement of words and things as well, I suppose. But typography is more what you would do in like typographic setting in desktop publisher programs, or things like that. So there's differences between them, although some terms can be used fairly interchangeably. So just thought you might like to know that. And I'm wittering on, and my video will have gone beyond the time that we'd like it to have. So thank you for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I look forward to, fingers crossed, you joining me again if you're new here. And if you enjoyed the slow stitching, please let me know. If you didn't enjoy, or if you don't want to see things like this, I say slow stitching, if you don't want to see things like this, please let me know as well. But I'll still do what I want to do because it's my channel. But said it's something a bit different. So take care, enjoy the rest of your day, and I shall hopefully see you again, not Thursday, tomorrow. Today's Wednesday, the 1st of June. Not on a Thursday, because Thursdays I focus on this week's colouring template for the Facebook group. And so I don't generally do a video on a Thursday. But I nearly always leave something in the comments so you can see what I've been up to. So take care and find time to be creative. Bye for now. Bye.